Montana Territory, 1872. Quinn Ingram squinted against the bright afternoon sun as he paced the length of the train platform for the 20th time. Sweat trickled beneath his collar despite the cool autumn breeze. He clutched a worn photograph in his calloused hand, a young woman with gentle eyes staring back at him from a studio portrait taken somewhere back east. Miss Amelia Wilton, his mail-order bride, was due to arrive today. At 24, Quinn had already staked his claim on a promising stretch of land outside Silver Creek. His small cattle operation was growing. The cabin he'd built stood proud against the mountain backdrop, and now all he lacked was someone to share it with. Someone to transform his house into a home. The frontier was no place for a man alone. That's what he'd told himself when he'd placed the advertisement 6 months ago. A man needed a practical arrangement out here, not some foolish notion of romance. Love was a luxury the West couldn't afford. Quinn straightened his best shirt and adjusted his hat. The train whistle pierced the air, announcing its arrival with a plume of black smoke visible over the pines. His heart hammered against his ribs. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad, not meet your bride," chuckled Hank, the station manager. Quinn managed a tight smile. "Just want to make a good impression is all." The truth was more complicated. Quinn had left his family's farm in Pennsylvania after the war, determined to build something of his own, something untouched by the violence he'd witnessed. For years in the cavalry had hardened him in ways he couldn't explain to anyone who hadn't been there. The West represented a clean slate, but also a solitary one. He'd convinced himself that solitude was safer than connection, until the silence of his cabin became too much to bear. The train groaned to a halt, steam billowing around its iron wheels. Quinn stepped forward, scanning each face that emerged. A tall gentleman in a bowler hat, a young couple, a salesman with sample cases. Then, finally, a young woman appeared in the doorway. Her auburn hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest blue bonnet that matched her travel dress. But instead of the solitary figure he expected, she was surrounded by children. 5 of them, ranging from a toddler clutched to her hip to a boy of perhaps 10 years. The woman's face was flushed as she attempted to corral the children, her green eyes darting around the platform anxiously. Quinn stood frozen, the photograph crumpling slightly in his grip. This wasn't Amelia Wilton. As the last passengers disembarked, there was no sign of his intended bride. The woman with the children seemed to be searching the crowd as desperately as he was. When her gaze locked with his, something passed between them. A question, perhaps recognition. She approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Ingram?" "Quinn Ingram." Her voice was melodic but tinged with uncertainty. Quinn nodded, confusion evident on his face. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Quinn Ingram. I'm Abigail Lancaster." She straightened her shoulders despite the weight of the child on her hip. "I believe you were expecting someone else today." "Miss Wilton," he confirmed, still scanning the platform. "Amelia Wilton." Abigail's expression fell. "I'm afraid Miss Wilton won't be coming, Mr. Ingram." She glanced at the children gathered around her skirts. "Perhaps we could speak privately?" Quinn looked down at the 5 expectant faces staring up at him. The oldest boy stood protectively close to his mother, sizing Quinn up with suspicious eyes. The middle girl, perhaps 7, clutched a worn rag doll. Twin boys of about 5 fidgeted restlessly, while the toddler on Abigail's hip buried her face in her mother's shoulder. "There's a cafe just down the street," Quinn offered, gesturing toward the main street of Silver Creek. The walk was awkward, Quinn carrying Abigail's trunk while she marshaled her children like a seasoned trail boss. Inside the cafe, Mrs. Patterson fussed over the children, bringing them milk and cookies while Quinn and Abigail settled at a corner table. "I apologize for the confusion," Abigail began, removing her gloves with deliberate care. "Amelia was my cousin. We grew up together in Boston. She passed away 3 months ago. Consumption." Quinn removed his hat, holding it in his hands. "I'm sorry to hear that. But I don't understand." "She received your letters. All of them. She read them to me when I would visit. After my husband died last year in a mill accident, she was my only family. When she became ill, she asked me to write to you on her behalf." Abigail's cheeks flushed. "The correspondence you received these past 3 months was from me, not Amelia." Quinn felt the weight of this revelation. The letters he'd cherished, describing shared dreams of building a life in the West, hadn't come from the woman in the photograph at all. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. Amelia believed in what you were building here. She thought. Abigail hesitated. She thought that perhaps you might consider me instead, but I couldn't bring myself to deceive you outright. I intended to explain everything in person and offer to purchase return tickets for myself and my children. Quinn studied the woman before him. At 26, Abigail Lancaster's face held a quiet beauty marked by sorrow and resilience. Unlike the photograph of Amelia, which showed a carefully posed studio portrait, Abigail's beauty seemed lived in, genuine. The weight of 5 children had not dimmed the spark in her green eyes. You came all this way to tell me in person, Quinn observed. That was honorable. It seemed the least I could do after the kindness you showed in your letters. She glanced toward her children. I'll understand if you wish us to leave on tomorrow's train. Before Quinn could respond, the cafe door burst open. Sheriff Miller stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Quinn, there's a grass fire headed toward your property from the south. Fletcher's rounding up men now. Quinn stood abruptly. My cattle. Boys are already moving them to the north pasture. But that cabin of yours might be in the path. Quinn jammed his hat back on his head. Mrs. Lancaster, I apologize, but I have to go. Of course, she said, rising as well. Is there anything we can do? The sheriff looked at the children dubiously. Train to Billings doesn't leave until tomorrow morning. Mrs. Patterson can put you up for the night. Quinn was already heading for the door when he heard Abigail's voice behind him. Mr. Ingram, wait. He turned. When you return, regardless of how things stand with your property, I would still like to speak with you. Her voice was steady, despite the concern in her eyes. Perhaps there's another solution that might benefit us both. Quinn tipped his hat in acknowledgement before rushing out to where his horse waited. The fire burned through the night. Quinn worked alongside 24 men from Silver Creek, digging fire breaks and beating back flames with wet blankets. By dawn, they'd managed to save most of his grazing land, though the south fence would need rebuilding. His cabin, thankfully, had been spared, protected by the creek that bordered his property. Exhausted, soot-covered, and smelling of smoke, Quinn returned to town. He had intended to visit the hotel where Mrs. Patterson would have placed Abigail and her children, but he needed to clean up first. He was surprised to find them waiting on his small front porch when he rode up. Abigail stood as he approached, her expression both relieved and uncertain. Mr. Fletcher brought us out. He said you might need help setting things right. Quinn dismounted, suddenly conscious of his appearance. Mrs. Lancaster, this isn't necessary. Please, she interrupted, call me Abigail. And it is necessary. You've lost a day's work because of the fire, and time is precious on a ranch. She gestured to her children, who stood in a neat row. We may not look it, but we're quite capable. The oldest boy stepped forward. I'm James, sir. I can help with the fences. I worked with my father in the lumber mill. The 7-year-old girl curtsied. I'm Sarah. I can cook and keep house. The twins, Michael and Matthew, announced they could carry water and feed animals, while little Elizabeth, the toddler, simply smiled shyly from behind her mother's skirts. Quinn was speechless. These city folk from Boston had no idea what ranch work entailed, yet here they stood, offering help as if they belonged here. You should at least see the place before you volunteer, Quinn said finally, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. It's nothing like Boston. We're not in Boston anymore, Abigail replied simply, and we need to find our place in this new world. Quinn showed them around his modest property, the 2-room cabin he'd built with his own hands, the small barn, the corral where he broke horses for extra income, and the creek that provided water year-round. Abigail asked intelligent questions about his operation, while the children explored with enthusiastic curiosity. By midday, they had fallen into an unexpected rhythm. James proved surprisingly strong for his age, helping Quinn replace burned fence posts. Sarah, true to her word, prepared a simple but satisfying meal from Quinn's meager pantry. The twins entertained little Elizabeth while fetching tools and water. As the sun began its descent, Quinn found Abigail standing alone by the creek, watching the water flow over smooth stones. Your children are remarkable, he said, coming to stand beside her. They've had to grow up quickly, she replied. First losing their father, then being uprooted from everything familiar. And now here you are, stranded in Montana territory with a stranger. Abigail turned to face him. About that, Mr. Ingram. Quinn, he corrected gently. Quinn, she acknowledged with a small smile. I have a proposition for you. One that might solve both our problems. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. You need help with this ranch. I need a safe place for my children to grow up, away from the factories and tenements of Boston. I'm not asking for marriage. I understand that's not what you bargained for, but perhaps an arrangement. Employment, of sorts. Room and board in exchange for my keeping your house and helping with the ranch. My children will work too, as they're able. Quinn considered her words carefully. You'd come all this way for a position as housekeeper? I came all this way for a chance at a better life, Abigail corrected him. One where my children can breathe clean air and learn honest work. One where James won't end up in a dangerous mill like his father. Quinn looked back toward the cabin, where the children were chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. It wouldn't be proper, he said finally. A single woman living under my roof. We could build a small addition. Or I could take the cabin, and you could use the barn until something more suitable is constructed. Her eyes held a determination that Quinn recognized, the same determination that had brought him west 4 years ago. You've thought this through, he observed. I've had little else to think about since Amelia died, she admitted. Quinn, I don't expect anything from you except fair treatment and respect. In return, you'll have a well-run household and help with your ranch. If it doesn't work out, I'll have earned enough for train fare elsewhere by spring. Quinn found himself considering her proposal seriously. The truth was, the ranch demanded more work than one man could handle. Hiring seasonal help was expensive, and good help was hard to find. And the silence of his cabin had grown deafening these past years. Let me think on it, he said finally. They returned to the cabin to find that Sarah had somehow managed to prepare a stew from Quinn's garden vegetables and a rabbit James had snared. As they ate by lamplight, Quinn found himself studying each of these unexpected visitors. James, solemn and watchful. Sarah, nurturing beyond her years. The twins, identical in appearance but different in temperament. Matthew quiet and observant, Michael quick to laugh. And little Elizabeth, who had somehow ended up on Quinn's knee after dinner, falling asleep against his chest. When Abigail gently took the sleeping child from him, their hands brushed. Quinn felt an unexpected jolt of awareness, quickly suppressed. We should return to town, Abigail said softly. We've imposed enough for one day. Stay the night, Quinn found himself saying. It's dark, and the road can be treacherous. I'll sleep in the barn. Abigail hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. That night, lying on hay in his own barn, Quinn stared at the rafters above. His neat, solitary life had been upended in a single day. The bride he'd expected hadn't arrived, but instead, he had a widow and 5 children sleeping in his cabin. The careful emotional walls he'd built since the war suddenly seemed less sturdy than the fence posts they'd replaced today. Quinn had always believed that attachment was dangerous, that caring too deeply meant risking the kind of pain he'd witnessed during the war. His arrangement with Amelia had been practical, sensible, but there was nothing sensible about the way his chest had tightened when little Elizabeth fell asleep in his arms. By morning, he'd made his decision. 3 months, he told Abigail over coffee, while the children still slept. We'll try your arrangement for 3 months. If it works for all of us, we'll discuss more permanent terms. Relief flooded her face. Thank you, Quinn. You won't regret this. There are conditions, he continued. First, we need to establish proper accommodations. I'll speak with Reverend Thomas about borrowing a tent until I can build a proper addition to the cabin. Second, your children will need schooling. The town has a small schoolhouse. Of course, Abigail agreed. Third, Quinn hesitated. We need to be clear with the townspeople about our arrangement. Silver Creek is small, and talk spreads quickly. I understand, she said quietly. I wouldn't want to damage your reputation. Quinn managed a wry smile. I'm more concerned about yours, Mrs. Lancaster. The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Quinn constructed a sturdy tent dwelling behind the cabin, where he slept while beginning work on a proper addition. James proved an able assistant, eager to learn carpentry skills. The twins found their niche helping with the livestock, while Sarah transformed Quinn's utilitarian cabin into something approaching a home. October turned to November. The children began attending the small schoolhouse in Silver Creek 3 days a week, riding double with Quinn or Abigail. The ranch work continued, preparing for winter, bringing in the last hay, ensuring the cattle were ready for the cold months ahead. Quinn found himself watching Abigail when she wasn't looking. The way she managed her children with firm kindness. The capable manner in which she tackled unfamiliar ranch tasks. The quiet moments when she sat by the creek, sometimes with tears she thought no one could see. She was unlike any woman he'd met, neither the fragile eastern flowers nor the hardened frontier women. Abigail Lancaster occupied some middle ground, blending strength with sensitivity in a way that increasingly fascinated him. For her part, Abigail seemed to be studying Quinn as well. She asked questions about his time in the cavalry, about his family back east, about his dreams for the ranch. Questions that probed deeper than he was sometimes comfortable answering. Yet he found himself revealing more than he had to anyone since coming west. One evening in early December, with snow falling gently outside, Quinn sat before the fireplace repairing a bridle. The children were asleep in the new addition he'd completed just as the first snows arrived. Abigail sat across from him, mending one of James's shirts. "You never speak of your husband," Quinn observed quietly. Abigail's hands stilled. "Thomas was a good man, hard-working, devoted to the children." She resumed her stitching. "But ours was not a love match, if that's what you're asking." Quinn looked up, surprised by her candor. "My father arranged it," she continued. "Thomas needed a wife to care for his son, James, after his first wife died in childbirth. I was 20, with few prospects. It seemed a sensible arrangement. And the other children?" A small smile touched her lips. "Came along in rapid succession. We found a comfortable companionship, Thomas and I. Not the grand passion one reads about in novels, but a partnership based on mutual respect." Quinn nodded, understanding such practical unions all too well. "That's all one can really expect out here. Is it?" Abigail's gaze was steady. "Is that all you expected with Amelia? A practical arrangement?" The question caught him off guard. "I expected compatibility. Someone who understood the demands of ranch life. Someone willing to build something alongside me. Not love." The word hung between them. Quinn set aside the bridle. "Love is a luxury, Mrs. Lancaster. One that gets tarnished quick in places like this." "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully. "Or perhaps it's the only thing that makes such places bearable." Before Quinn could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Barking dogs, the snort of horses, men's voices calling out. Quinn was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside," he ordered, moving to the door. Outside, 3 riders had entered his yard, their horses steaming in the cold. Quinn recognized Fletcher from town, along with the sheriff and a stranger, tall, well-dressed despite the trail dust, with a bearing that spoke of Eastern breeding. "Quinn," Sheriff Miller called, dismounting. "Sorry to disturb you so late. This gentleman has been asking after Mrs. Lancaster." The stranger stepped forward, removing his hat. "Quincy Blackwell, representing the firm of Blackwell and Sons, Boston. I've been tracking Mrs. Lancaster and her children since they left Massachusetts." His cold eyes assessed Quinn. "I understand they're in your care." Behind Quinn, the cabin door opened. Abigail stepped onto the porch, wrapping a shawl tightly around her shoulders. When she saw the visitor, her face drained of color. "Mr. Blackwell," she acknowledged, her voice barely audible. "Mrs. Lancaster." He offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've led us on quite a chase." Quinn moved protectively closer to Abigail. "What business do you have with Mrs. Lancaster?" "Family business," Blackwell replied smoothly. "Mrs. Lancaster's late husband was my cousin. The children are Blackwell's by blood, and as such, fall under the protection of our family. We've come to bring them home to Boston." "They are home," Quinn said flatly. Abigail placed a restraining hand on Quinn's arm. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside, Mr. Blackwell. The sheriff and Mr. Fletcher are welcome to come in from the cold as well." The men stomped snow from their boots and entered the warm cabin. Quinn positioned himself near Abigail, his instincts screaming that something was very wrong. Blackwell declined coffee, standing with the air of a man accustomed to getting his way. "I'll be direct, Mrs. Lancaster. The family is prepared to offer you a generous settlement in exchange for the children. $500, enough to establish yourself comfortably elsewhere." "Excuse me." Abigail's voice was ice. "The Blackwell name carries significant weight in Boston. These children require proper upbringing, proper education. My aunt, Thomas's mother, is most anxious to ensure they receive it. By separating them from their mother?" Quinn interjected incredulously. Blackwell's gaze flicked dismissively to Quinn. "This arrangement would benefit everyone. Mrs. Lancaster would be free of the burden of 5 children. The children would receive advantages she cannot provide, and the family name would be preserved. The answer is no, Abigail said firmly. My children stay with me. Blackwell's pleasant facade slipped slightly. I'm afraid it's not quite that simple. I have documentation. He removed papers from his coat, signed by Judge Carleton of Massachusetts, granting temporary custody to Mrs. Thomas Blackwell Sr. while the matter is investigated. Your hasty departure from Boston before this could be properly addressed has not helped your case. Quinn stepped forward. Sheriff, this can't be legal. He can't just take children from their mother. Sheriff Miller looked uncomfortable. Eastern court orders ain't always clear out here, Quinn. Might need to consult the territorial judge in Helena, which could take weeks, Blackwell noted with satisfaction. In the meantime, the children would naturally remain in my custody. Over my dead body, Quinn growled. Fletcher placed a cautioning hand on Quinn's shoulder. Easy, friend. Abigail's voice cut through the tension. Sheriff Miller, I left Boston precisely to escape this threat. Thomas's mother never approved of me. She blamed me when Thomas died, claimed I drove him to work too hard providing for too many children. Her eyes flashed with maternal fury. These papers were obtained under false pretenses. I have documentation of my own. Thomas's will naming me sole guardian, letters from our family physician attesting to my fitness as a mother. Documentation that will need to be verified, Blackwell countered smoothly. In the interim, Quinn interrupted. The children remain here, with their mother. On my property, under my protection. Blackwell's expression hardened. And you are? What exactly to these children, Mr. Ingram? I understand Mrs. Lancaster is employed as your housekeeper. Hardly a stable arrangement. A tense silence fell. Quinn looked at Abigail, whose face had paled further at the implication in Blackwell's tone. Mrs. Lancaster is my fiancée, Quinn heard himself say. Our arrangement was temporary while proper accommodations were prepared. The wedding is planned for Christmas. Abigail's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly recovered. Yes, she confirmed, moving to Quinn's side. Quinn has been a father to my children these past months. We had hoped to make it official before spring. Sheriff Miller's eyebrows shot up, but Fletcher was nodding as if this confirmed his suspicions. Blackwell's jaw tightened. A convenient claim. One that will require verification. Reverend Thomas can confirm our intentions, Quinn said firmly. Now, gentlemen, it's late, and this discussion has upset my family enough for one night. After Blackwell and the sheriff departed, with promises to return the following day, Fletcher lingered. Quick thinking, Quinn, he said quietly. But Blackwell doesn't strike me as a man who gives up easily. That engagement better become real, and fast, or he'll use it against you both. After Fletcher left, Quinn and Abigail stood in awkward silence. The easy companionship they developed over the past months seemed suddenly fragile. I apologize for speaking out of turn, Quinn finally said. I shouldn't have. You were protecting my children, Abigail interrupted. I'm grateful, truly. Fletcher's right, though. Blackwell will investigate. He'll question the reverend, the townspeople. Our story won't hold. Abigail sank into a chair, the weight of the situation overwhelming her. I can't lose my children, Quinn. I won't. Quinn knelt beside her chair. You won't lose them. I promise you that. What choice do we have? She asked, meeting his gaze directly. A real marriage would solve everything, but I won't trap you into that. You wanted a young bride, not a widow with 5 children. Quinn took her hand, surprising them both. Abigail, when I sent for a mail-order bride, I thought I knew what I wanted. Someone practical, someone who wouldn't demand too much of me emotionally. I was afraid. He hesitated, then continued more softly. Afraid of caring too deeply. Of losing someone again. The war, she said, understanding lighting her eyes. He nodded. I saw too many men destroyed by loss. I decided it was safer to keep my distance, to make practical arrangements rather than emotional connections. And now, Quinn looked toward the addition where her children slept. Now I find myself thinking about James's future on this ranch. About seeing Sarah grow into a young woman. About teaching the twins to ride. About hearing Elizabeth's laughter each morning. His gaze returned to Abigail's face. And about you, Abigail. Your strength. Your kindness. The way you've brought life back to this place. And to me. Tears filled Abigail's eyes. Quinn, are you saying, I'm saying that sometimes what we think we want isn't what we need at all. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm saying that if you would consider it, I would be honored to make our engagement real. Not just for the children's sake, but for ours as well. You don't have to do this, she whispered. I know. He smiled slightly. That's why I want to. They were married 3 days later in Silver Creek's small church, with the entire town in attendance. Quincy Blackwell sat in the back pew, his expression thunderous as Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife. When Quinn kissed his bride, tentatively at first, then with surprising warmth, little Elizabeth clapped her hands in delight from Sarah's arms. After the ceremony, Blackwell approached them outside the church. This changes nothing, he said coldly. A hasty marriage won't erase concerns about the children's welfare. Before Quinn could respond, Fletcher stepped forward. Actually, Mr. Blackwell, it changes everything. He produced a document from his coat pocket. Territorial judge arrived from Helena this morning, reviewed all the documentation and ruled that the Massachusetts order has no standing here. The children belong with their mother and her new husband. Blackwell snatched the paper, reading it with growing fury. This is outrageous. My family has no authority in Montana Territory, Fletcher finished firmly. Good day, sir. I believe the eastbound train departs tomorrow morning. As Blackwell stormed away, Quinn turned to Fletcher in amazement. How did you manage that? Fletcher winked. Telegraphed the judge myself when I left your place the other night. Old Jeremiah and I served together. He was happy to make a special trip for a fellow veteran. He clapped Quinn on the shoulder. Congratulations, by the way. Never thought I'd see the day. That evening, with the children finally asleep after the excitement of the wedding, Quinn and Abigail stood together on the porch of their cabin. Snow fell softly around them, transforming the ranch into a pristine wonderland. Are you disappointed? Abigail asked quietly. That things didn't turn out as you planned? Quinn considered the question seriously. When I came west, I was running from something. From feeling too much, from caring too deeply. I thought I could build a life based on practicality alone. He turned to face her. But you and the children showed me that walls don't actually protect you. They just keep you isolated. And lonely, Abigail added softly. Yes. Quinn reached for her hand. I'm not disappointed, Abigail. For the first time since before the war, I feel hopeful. Abigail's smile was radiant in the moonlight. I never expected to find love again. Especially not out here, at the edge of civilization. Perhaps, Quinn said, drawing her closer. That's exactly where love belongs most. Where it's needed most desperately. As he kissed his wife beneath the falling snow, Quinn Ingram finally understood what he'd been building all these years. Not just a ranch, not just a homestead, but the foundation for something he'd never dared hope for, a family. The frontier that had once seemed so empty now felt full of promise, full of life, full of a future brighter than he could have imagined. By spring, the addition to the cabin had been expanded into a proper home with rooms for all the children. Quinn had registered the ranch under a new name, Seven Hearts Ranch. One for each member of the family, and one for the love that had brought them together against all odds.